Welcome to Rev Up Your Potential with Hilda Gann, the stories about entrepreneurs, business leaders, and HR professionals and their successes and struggles along their journey. In this podcast, we also discuss the HR challenges that people face and the tips and strategies that have helped them. If you love to learn through storytelling, join us. So welcome to another episode. And today, my guest is Kathy Barthel. She is the founder of Take on the World. Like that title? She is a video and brand presence coach and trainer with a background that's you're going to love. She's a TV producer. She's a TV host, a journalist for shows like, or for companies like CTV, CBC, YTV, HGTV. We are in for a treat, and I want Kathy to share her experience with us. Welcome, Kathy. How are you?
I'm good, Hilda. Thank you so much for having me on the show. This is really great. Really enjoying it.
I'm so looking forward to your ability to share with us how we can ignite our audiences, because I remember the first time I saw you and I could just see how your face just lights up the cameras. So I want you to help us be more confident in who we are.
Yeah. Well, it's, what I always say to people, Hilda, and it's like, with my background in television and so on is, and you might have heard this, there's something called, used to call it a TVQ, which you would think, it was a way they measured actors on television. And it was in terms of, how they emotionally came through the screen, how likable, especially, they were to an audience. So that's essentially what I do with my clients, whether they are, CEOs, whether they're business owners, whatever. It's about really being able to step up and own what makes you different and what that is, and to really not worry about whether somebody likes it or gets it or not. That's step number one. But the second piece is just as important. It's the other half of the circle. And that is your focus on that viewer. The fact that they are literally and figuratively the most important person in the room. And we have a lot of lip service paid to things like that on camera. They've got to be the most important person. You've got to think of them as your best friend, as your favorite client, similarly to how we have had in business. And this is something having, as I'm sure you had the background, working with and managing teams. And we would say in business, that cliche, I'm only as strong as my team. And yet the team were basically struggling to be seen or to be heard. It became a nasty little thing that was almost, okay, show me, prove it to me. Because a lot of people who manage his teams don't really do the best job. They might have good intentions, but the team doesn't feel it. Similarly, your audience has to feel that you are genuinely interested in them, that whatever you are saying is not coming from marketing or from other, benchmarks you have for your company. Of course you have those, but the whole point is that television or camera on video is about human relationship. It's about you and the relationship you have to you, right? To owning this, to being confident in who you are. And then it's about that intimacy of you and that person on the other side of the screen. That is the power of video, because, when you meet someone in person, which we're starting to do again in the work world, whether it's over a coffee, at an event, there's distractions, right? There's stuff going on. But on camera, it's just the two of you. Mm-hmm. And when you are fully present to that, same as an actor who brings that energy, and you feel it when you're watching it on television or on your computer or whatever. That's what you want to do in business on video.
And I like the 2 points that I picked up on is making that connection. And if you identify your confident self and show that you can, that's a great starting point of making that connection. Because if you're trying to sell something that you don't truly believe in, people see that. They really see that, right? Yeah. Like, I remember the first time I was at a conference and the person read from the thing. I said, you're an expert in emergency. You're reading this like right away. I don't even believe you because you,
and sadly, that's nerves. right? That's nerves.
Yes, it was nerves, and there was a
Yeah.
total disconnect. So I love how you talked about the uniqueness. I talked about the confidence and connecting. Like that person is the only person in the room,
Yes.
because
Yes.
we know that when we go live to events, and you're saying, "Oh yeah," and I like that, they can see that you don't care about them. You're looking for
Yeah.
the next person you want to talk to,
Yes. And
for
this is the other
sure.
piece of it. You have to be that same existing, consistent person on
Yeah.
camera as off. And that's very hard, admittedly. That's very hard for a lot of people in business. This is a very alien concept. It's very unnatural. And what I talk about is actually something that's very natural, which is human connection. So there's a bit of
Hmm.
a major little jump that people have to make
Yeah.
cognitively and just in terms of their being and how they understand video and making that connection with it. Because often, if I work with someone who's a speaker, and many times we speak for our businesses, right?
Hmm.
And corporately and so on, and that person is used to feeding off the energy of an audience. And here it's not that. And it's like expecting an apple to be a pineapple or, a rock or whatever. It's
Yeah.
it's a completely different beast.
It,
And
it,
you have to respect what video's power is about and then connect with it.
it is totally different, because I know that as people are going back into the real world and they're on stage speaking, they get that energy
Yes.
from the audience or the participants, and that energizes them, which energizes the participant. But when we're looking at cameras, it's not quite the same.
But we
Right?
have to bring it. That's the thing. We have to
Yes,
bring it. And
yes,
it's
yes.
it's funny because, like I'm a very outgoing, I'm sure I'm a extrovert. I mean, it's on a spectrum anyway. It's not like I'm fully and no one is fully, but I'm very outgoing and I'm a people person.
Mhm.
But the funny thing about the camera is that it exaggerates everything. This is why you don't want to be, I'm a big hand talker, obviously. So I try to measure that and not be too large with the hands and not, of course, you don't want to go too close to the lens, but you need to bring your own energy and you need to ramp it up a little. I do exercises with clients because they might deliver a line or say a line on camera the way they normally would. And they think that's how I talk. Kathy wants me to be me. So I did it. What's wrong with it? But they have to crank it up just a little. And sometimes you have to crank it up more energy wise than you think, to the point where you think that's got to be overkill. I've got to have overdone it. And then you watch the clip of the video and you go, actually, that sounded natural. That sounded like I'm alive, like I'm
Yeah,
energized,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
But not
Thank
too
you.
much. So
So,
it's a balance.
so
Takes
tell
some
us.
practice.
Thank you for those tips. Tell us a little bit about your background. I mean,
Mm.
it's impressive, some of the companies that you work for, like CBC and CTV. Tell us a little bit more of that and how that shaped who you are
Yeah.
now and why you started your own company from all that experience. So tell us a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, if we can compress a lot into a short period
Sure,
here,
sure.
we're going to take a little quick jump back to before I started my business and my career in media. I had always had what I still say and served me very well in media and now as a video coach and teacher. And that is that I kind of have two halves to my head. On the one side is the video piece, the visual piece. So I was always good in art and I loved photography. I was a photo editor when I started in the media. So there's that piece. And I was always in the drama club. So it's that visual performative understanding the balance of all the visual elements part. And then
Mhm.
this half of my brain is the writer and editor. I was in advanced level English classes in school. I was a valedictorian. I've always written all kinds of things through my media career, especially. So there was always those two sides. And I ended up starting in magazines, as I say, as a photo editor. And then out of that, I started getting into writing, what we call photo features, where it's heavy on the photo and then it's kind of like fat captions, you
Mhm.
know, and that's how I began. And then I had an opportunity to get into television. I had reached a point, like we sometimes do in your career, where you're kind of stuck and you need to leave in order to get to the next level and so on. So I got into television and I was the research supervisor for the largest show that YTV ever did. And it's still so close to my heart. Aside from helping people with my business now and a lot of wonderful experiences in TV, working on what was called the YTV Achievement Awards was, I always get goosebumps when I think about it, because essentially it was a variety show, but it was it inspired kids across Canada to achieve. So everything from a bravery category to public service to the Terry Fox category that we worked closely with the Terry Fox family, music, all kinds of things, all of these categories. And I started in there, and I had about 3 different jobs in one. And I got sort of, in the deep end with the hours that you tend to put in television. And, but that gets to the piece of, even being on camera, it's so important as an entrepreneur, and certainly in a career, if you can do what really lights you up, right? Slight digression, but in any case, that was the getting into television piece. And then over the next bunch of years, I did a lot of work in television, as you say. I was co-hosting on camera. I was producing. I was doing casting and some writing and associate producing, chase producing, which is when you're rushing to get interviews and guests lined up, kind of like what you do for your
like
show and I do for my own show, right? You know what that is. Now you can say, Hilda, that you're a cast producer. But a lot of different roles and understanding how all of that worked, and then perhaps because of the way I'm wired, but because of the way my career ended up going, I often had overlap. I started writing about architecture and design, and I had been writing also about TV and film. So some of that overlapped being on camera and being in TV production. So it's been a really, really rich use of my entire skill set.
I can hear that diversity in you, like this almost full cycle of media, in terms of from writing it to producing it to being on the show and everything. Wow, what an amazing opportunity.
It's been great. And I've interviewed everybody from, architects, international architects and designers, to British royalty, to a lot of entrepreneurs, all kinds of people, and people in film, like a director, a cinematographer. I love understanding what makes people tick, right? What goes on in their mind when they do what they do.
That's what I love about my show, because I get to pick people, and I get to go behind that facial person and go in depth and learn about it. I find people, period, are so interesting. Interesting.
Oh, yes. And so I've always been a very creative person. As I say, I always drew and wrote, when I was a kid. And so that's I'm very grateful for such a rich and layered and in-depth and overlapping and so on. Rich is really the only word I can think of, type of career, Yeah. And then one of the things, ironically, I wrote about back in the year 2000. Doesn't that seem like an eternity ago? My goodness.
It was the turn of the century. I never thought I would make the turn of the century.
I wrote an article. And it was all about all the media mergers, because in the media industry, it kind of hit us a lot sooner than it did other industries, where companies were buying up other companies.
Yeah.
And so that ultimately, not specifically a merger, but the downsizings and things that happen, led me to have an opportunity to actually create something of my own, which, as you say, is my company, Take on the World. And that happened. And, I was at this point, like we often are, you're sitting there and you're thinking, okay, what is my next best move? What do I really want to do? And I had always wanted to do a show, right? My own show. And I had reached a point, due to life circumstances and choices and things I'd seen and felt, that I really wanted Hilda to do something that helped. In particular, I have amazing guy clients, men clients, and I love them. But I specifically want to help women get their voices out. And I know this has sort of become almost a cliche, but it's always been something really integral to what motivates me, because, I've seen, and I'm sure you've seen, people in my life, people close to me, who had so much potential and so much talent, and they just couldn't get it over the finish line. They just couldn't consistently really own that and say, this is who I am. There's somebody for you. If I don't suit you, that's okay. I'm not gonna shrink myself down to make you feel better or to fit this mold or that mold, right? And that's a hard thing to do in life and in business. So that was another motivating factor when I sat there and I thought, okay, what am I going to create? And then it seemed like, and I've said a lot on this, and I will be saying more of this, not necessarily today, unless you want me to, but the fact that so many times people start businesses, not always, but so often entrepreneurs start businesses based on two things. Well, I did this thing in corporate. I'm really good at it. Hey, there's a market for it. Bingo, I'll make a business out of that.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
sounds really great and it's very logical. But ultimately, if you don't love what you're doing, you're going to sabotage that one way or another, usually
Yeah.
unconsciously.
Yeah.
You're going to sabotage the success of that business because, as you know, Hilda, as I know, there's so many twists and turns and real dints and, ditches we go through as entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
If you're not, right? If you're not just
It's the
lit up by it.
passion. If you don't have a passion for what you do, those down days are really going to think, why am I doing this?
Exactly.
But if you have the passion that holds you and keeps you going, and I love the fact that you have this desire to help women. I don't know, men sometimes are nurtured to feel confident from day one.
Yeah.
Women are not nurtured. They're nurtured to support others, to help
Yes.
others, and not to think about themselves and to put themselves in a way that I want to be this, I can achieve this.
Yeah.
No, that seems to always be the back burner. So I love how you're passionate about doing that and you want to do that. So let's talk about B.R.A.T and Bratty Kathy. Tell us more.
Okay. I'm always delighted with that, when somebody asks me this. Um, okay. Yes, my name is Kathy Barthel, but if you flip those letters, I'm also known as Bratty Kathy. And what happened with this was tied to what you're saying, my wanting to do what I want to do to help women. I started a personal blog a number of years ago called Bratty Kathy. And I always wanted to turn that concept of being a brat, which is women who stir things up to be heard, to make a difference, and to have a little fun. That's what essentially a brat is. And that was how it began in the blog, right? And then, out of that, that was when I was around the time about to start the business, Take on the World. And I was working with a wonderful business coach, and it came time to name the business. And she said, you know what? You should call your company Take on the World. And it was like, hit me out of nowhere. And I'm like, what? Why? And she said, because you're always saying you want to inspire women to be brats so they can take on the world. And I'm like, yeah, I am. But there was a part of me that was saying, but how about the brat thing over here? How are we going to bring that? This is great, but And of course, as I say, I started logically. I have this really deep journalism, interviewing, and writing skill set. So I started as a website copywriter, and then I added on book editing and writing coach for entrepreneurs who had books. And then somewhere in there a few years ago, I added video to my business in terms of what I offered. So over time, it has evolved to be just about video. But the brat thread was, of course, always poking at me, like anything that if something doesn't let you go, there's some reason it needs to be born and you've got to pay attention, right?
Yeah.
But it takes its own circuitous route sometimes to grow and to become whatever it's going to be. And so I've been figuring out how to do this over the years. And then finally, last year, I was able to launch my show, which is called The B.R.A.T Show. And B.R.A.T, by the way, is an acronym. And what it stands for is women who are bold, relevant, addictive, and transformative. Bold because they own who they are and what they're here to do, regardless of pushback. Relevant because they create meaningful content and experiences for their clients, their coworkers, their staff. And then, of course, addictive because they leave you wanting more, right? If they're owning who they are by being bold, then they're not trying to be a pleaser. They're not trying to be anything and everything to anyone. So you're only going to attract the ones that really fit you. And then, of course, you're going to be creating the relevant content for them such that you're addictive. It just stands to reason, to logic, that they're going to want more.
We want more.
Yes. And then, of course, the last piece, which is so important for me, is that you are transformational because you're stirring up the status quo, you're disrupting it to create positive change. Brats are disruptors who are creating positive change. And this can be, it starts within ourselves, of course, but it's about making those ripples, those big waves in the world, whatever your world is. It could be very small, and that's absolutely valid. It doesn't mean you're out there speaking somewhere on a big world stage. It could, but it's about something that always stuck with me from high school days. My school motto for my school was true to self. And it's funny, I kept that school ring, and some days at work I wear that school ring, believe it or not, because it's a guiding principle of me, of take on the world, of what being a brat is, right? If you're not anchored in this and what this is, like we said earlier, you're nowhere. You're just going to be buffeted by the wind. You're going to be, oh, I guess I should do this. Oh, I guess maybe that. And then how can you create something meaningful? How can you earn a decent living? How can you put something out in the world, right?
Yeah. And I like how you say anchored. And you're telling us your anchor started in high school. And that through that you evolve and you have a clearer picture, and you want that brat to really shine forth. That brat was there, but it's moving forward in a bolder, addictive way. So cool for you. And similarly, like me, I have my concept of Rev Up, hence the Rev Up Your Potential show. Yes. And that starts off as a 7-year-old, which I didn't realize until I started being more contemplative. And but again, it's nurturing it, it's fostering it, and then just really owning it. And I feel at this stage of my career and of my company, Rev Up has now been a brand that I'm owning, and I'm moving forward with it and making people addictive to my Rev Up concept. So I love, you and I have parallels in many, many ways. And I love the Bratty Kathy and this whole thing. So thanks, for sharing that with me. Let's talk a little bit about some of the joys that you've had in your journey as an entrepreneur now, and maybe some of those struggles. So whichever you want to start with.
Yeah. Well, I should say, actually, I've been a brat from day one. So I'm sure you've been long before high school. But it's about being true to all the aspects of you. Not hiding things, to just, like I say, right? So that's a really important piece of it. It's just not just to own this, but to own the whole of it, right? Mm-hmm. All the funny parts. But with regard to, and this is actually interesting to your question, because the reason, as I say, I started my business as a writer, as a copywriter for women primarily, and men's business owners' websites. And what I learned from that was that, and I knew this essentially, but I mean, it was reinforced. You know how it is when a client will say to you things that they've gotten out of working with you, and it reinforces what you hope they got or what you thought they got. And the more you hear it, the more, heartening it is. And they would say to me, Kathy, this is so much more than website copy. I got clarity on my brand and my voice and what makes me different and my client and all these things and my story. And I'm thinking to myself, you're not kidding me. I know that. And I'm so glad that you're getting it, So, but over time, when you're starting to shift in your business plan or your style of what you're doing, and this is what happened with Take on the World, was starting to shift because, as I would say to people closest to me, I was helping other people's, particularly women entrepreneurs, voices get out, but at the expense of my own. And that was quite a moment, not just a single moment, but a moment over a period of time, let's say, where that really started eating at my spirit. And because, as I learned later, and as I teach people, because I actually have a training for how to be a brat that's going to be launched in the next while. So you'll see what this means there. But essentially, it's about when you suppress some essential part of you, and oftentimes we do this in business for various logical reasons. And that's essentially what I did. I mean, I had brought on the video coaching and so on, but I feel very much alive on camera, very much at home. I'm a media person. I'm a media kid. That's how I've always worked. And as well, in person. But that was a really pivotal moment. And I was very unhappy. I had wonderful clients and I loved the results they got. And it was just so amazing. And I loved interviewing them, especially. Mm-hmm. But I realized, even though I have this strong writing and editing quality and talent, I ended up being in a very solitary space, writing and editing. Aside from the time I'd be interviewing them or going over the copy, I was alone so much of the time. And in my entire media career, I'd worked with people, I'd always
Right.
been on creative teams. And so that was a very like a hard stop in so many ways where I had this, I cannot do this anymore. What can I do differently? So the high was helping people get those ahas
Yeah.
and those things that went way beyond the copy. And I thought, how can I take that result that I get people without putting myself in a hole, so to speak, and
Yeah. Yeah.
suppressing my own spirit and my own light, right? And
Yeah.
what I really
Yeah.
wanted
You
to
were
work.
only partially there. Like you had that excitement, but that was only like maybe 30% or 50% of who you are. So that other
Yeah.
50 wasn't shining as
Right.
much as the other.
Yeah.
Right.
And I loved
Yeah.
giving talks for my business because I was in front of people and I kind of perform. I could make it fun. I could make it interesting and give them substance.
Yeah.
But then that worked. When that works, that just means you get more clients. So that would mean I'm back here typing, more and more. So yeah, so that's kind of the high and one of the really very somber moments. And I fought about this in my mind for the longest time because you're thinking, I've got to make money.
Yeah.
What am I going to do? I can't just stop, you know? So, yeah, that was a big deal.
That's quite the revelation. And I think all of us as entrepreneurs really need to continuously self-discover
Oh
what ignites our passions,
yeah.
what do we love to do, and find that happy, like that
Yeah.
medium, not where it's all this or all that, but
Mhm.
because you gotta build your business, you gotta make money, but you gotta enjoy what you're doing.
Exactly.
So thank you
Right.
for that revelation.
Oh, you're
Thank
welcome.
you for that
Yeah.
revelation. What kind of advice would you give to entrepreneurs that could help them be more successful? And you want to tie that into the media that you do, go ahead and share that with us.
Well, it's kind of woven into what I just said there, which is, of
Mhm.
course, to not. Well, it's two things. One is, this is the other thing, and I don't know how much you felt it. I imagine you have, and I don't know, what your actual training is. So this may not affect you as much as it did me and a lot of my peers. But my experience of being in the entrepreneur space in the last number of years is that it's quite a wild west. There wasn't any real training. There were a lot of coaches, a lot of the resources, and a lot of dubious stuff going on. Not necessarily deliberately so, but people who would be themselves trying to start a business
Yeah.
and think, "Well, I'll be a coach. I know how to do X and Y or whatever." But anyway, there've been a lot of things, and that's why I call it a wild west. So my first point would be get some proper training as to what it really means to start a business. And I'm talking not just your business plan, but definitely shorter version, tighter version, bigger version, but just the nuts and bolts of what that means,
Yeah.
which is really what a business consultant does. This is one of the places there was no clarity. Business coach, you go to and you think, she's going to help me build my business. Well, no, you need a business consultant to say, these are the things, this is what you need to do. The business coach, the coach doesn't really do that. That's not what a coach does. So there was a lot of cloudiness in my experience as to how I would learn these things. So number one, get some proper training. The colleges and universities are doing a lot of that in the last few years. Really go to something, legit and learn that.
Yeah.
And then the other piece is what I was just alluding to, which is take the time to really know what it is that lights you up. It's got to be this three-legged stool. You can't have the two legs like I did in the beginning, where I'm really good at this and there's a market for it. People need copywriters. Yeah, but I had a two-legged stool. So the third leg is to do the thing that lights you up. And that isn't just vaguely do what you love.
Mhm.
As I say, it's about, can I make money at it? Is there an audience? Is there a market for it? And am I really good at it? Because we can be in love with something and someone might say, well, the old keep your day job thing. Did you love that? That ant farm is a great idea, but I don't think you should build a business on an ant farm. I'm just saying. So, right. So it would be those three things, get the training. And then when you're sitting there building it, you got to love it. You got to be really good at it. And there's got to be a market for it. And without that, you don't really have a business as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, thanks. Now, part of what I like to do is I like to help entrepreneurs when they're building their business
Yeah.
think about the human resources side. And this isn't just for entrepreneurs that got 4 or 5
Mm,
people or 20 people or whatever. It's even for the solopreneurs who want to align themselves with associates. So I really like to talk about either the communication effectiveness or the leadership when you're leading people.
yeah.
You've worked in media, and I mean, I watched enough TV to know that you work closely as teams in high pressure situations on tight deadlines. Can you share some examples that kind of either show what a great team is and why you enjoyed that, or oh my God, nightmare time, and this is how we resolved it? Like, give
Mm,
us some insights from your
yeah.
experiences about how leadership and human resources can
Yeah.
build better or nightmare cultures.
Well, I think, as I said earlier, I think in our chat, there's oftentimes, sadly, over many years, been a lot of lip service paid to this idea of the team. I'm only as strong as my team. It really is true, right? And nowhere do you find that more true than in television, for example. I've worked on a lot of different kinds of shows, and I was on what I call the hair show, and it was one of those competitive TV things, and we had all these stylists and so on, and all these different things they had to do to compete. And there was a day where, well, the people who would be sitting in the chairs getting their hair done by this stylist in this competitive show would be regular folks, regular people who had emailed us and said, oh yeah, I've got hair, such an issue, I'd love to be on the show. So we had somebody all lined up, and she got a migraine. So my producer, there I am working away on the show, and my producer comes up, she says, Kathy, and yeah, Diane, what, she's like, how would you like to be in today's episode? And I'm just like, oh my goodness. I had the worst hair of anyone on the crew, anyone anywhere near this production, anywhere from, I mean, we mostly shot in the distillery. So from the distillery to Hamilton, up to wherever in south beyond the lake, I had the worst hair. So I don't think this was an accident that she asked me. And the episode was about hair extensions. So it was crazy, but it was also true to a team and working in television. And this is that everything, time is money. We've got the lights, we've got the crew, everybody's paid. There's this, that, there's an empty chair. We got to get a body in the chair, right? This thing has to happen. So it was comical, but it was serious as anything, right? We're shooting this show, and this episode has to happen today. There's a whole thing set up for today, and we're not going to roll it into tomorrow. Tomorrow is a different episode. So of course I ended up in the chair, and I got these amazing extensions. And I went out to the bar that night with everybody on the staff, and some of the competitors actually were sitting in the bar, and I'm getting hit on, and I'm just like, I'm not even, this sounds terrible. And I don't mean this askance to anybody who's blonde watching this, but normally I'm in a dark bar. If I were blonde, it would make sense. They just like, oh, there's a blonde, right? I wouldn't have stood out, or I would have stood out, but I've got this, and I'm just like, I'm kind of like feeling like Lady Godiva, and I'm just like, oh. So, but of course the next day I had to be on set really early. So I went to bed in the stuff, and anyway, I don't know how the guy who did my episode, that did my hair, actually ended up winning the competition. And no thanks to me, because I was such a brat. I was asking him questions as he's cutting my hair or fixing these things. And he's just, how he kept a straight face on camera. But the whole point is that is a team, right? That is, and I always have said that the best training for an entrepreneur, and obviously not everybody has this career line, but is working in media and working in television or something like that, because it's like, we got to get this thing happening. Nobody's sitting there having some prima donna, like, I'm not somebody anyway who would do this, but nobody lasts very long in television if they're like, oh, I just don't know, I'm not really sure, I don't, it's like, get in the chair, right? Let's get this thing done.
Yeah.
So it's very much about the team. And the same when I was at YTV, I managed a team of about 12, 16 researchers and interns. And I had an intern suggestion box for the show. And I mean, I've always believed that, great ideas come from everywhere, but that is, the leader is the one who is really listening and talking and out there photocopying. In those days, we're putting together packages for the nominees for this award and so on, like written material, bios, whatever. And you really need to be listening to, and this isn't new to anybody listening to this, but you really have to be listening to each of those team members and knowing that a good idea can come from absolutely anywhere. And that the
Exactly.
people, right? And it's, and they feel it. The same as what I was saying before about on camera, right?
Yeah.
When you are really focused genuinely on that person on the other side of that lens and helping them, or listening to those team members and recognizing the value in every single person, they feel it.
That, that hits on that essence of make people feel valued and belonging. And
Yes.
when they feel that they're part of a team, they want to contribute more. It's almost a rolling effect. Once you start working together cohesively, you start to enjoy that, you start to belong, and it just continues to evolve into this
Yeah.
wonderful culture. So it is about treating people with value.
Yeah.
It's treating them as equals and
Yeah.
listening to their voice, because when we feel we have are a part of something, it
Yeah.
becomes so much better for
Oh yeah.
everybody.
Well, and
So
this is, I mean, you're probably running out of time here, but do I have time to say one quick thing about video in relation to
sure,
that?
sure.
That is that, and this is where, and I'm going to sound like a Pollyanna or quite naive, but having had an entire career in media, I'm anything but naive. But what I really, really believe about video, over and above what I love to do with clients, is that video within the business space, on any way you want to look at that, HR videos, corporate videos, entrepreneur videos, kind of alluding to what we said earlier, is that because video is a medium of intimacy and human to human connection, and because it reveals us, whether we're just nervous,
Mhm.
whether we're heaven help us trying to pull something over on somebody and be ingenuous on camera or something, video reveals us. And so I really believe that it's an incredible resource to really humanize the way we treat each other in business, in the sense of, like you say, being respectful of each other, recognizing and talking to that individual and knowing who they are. Because that's the other thing. Even though oftentimes it's a recorded video, not always, but oftentimes, people still can feel known. Even if they're not
Yeah,
in real
yeah.
time responding to you on camera, they can feel it, because when you are oriented to who you are and you are working with video in the way that it is. I do this all the time because it's like essentially it's putting
Well, yeah,
blinders on us.
I get it. I get
I have a
it.
blog post with a horse with blinders, and this is the whole thing. But what video has the opportunity to do in business, the more business people are on video, is it's going to help us to be more honest, more transparent. And something that I absolutely hate, and any marketer is just going to be like, well, she clearly comes from journalism, is that I hate how oftentimes people talk about potential clients as targets. When you are having the orientation I've just said on camera, you cannot speak in that respectful human to human way
Yeah,
to
yeah,
the viewer and think of them as a target at the same time. It's just mentally, in every other which way, impossible, right?
yeah.
So
Target
video,
dehumanizes that
it
person.
dehumanizes them. It takes away their power, right? It makes them
Yeah,
just some object that you can manipulate.
yeah, yeah.
And this is where I think video has an opportunity that has not been fully realized yet. That makes me excited.
I love how you bring us back full circle. I mean, we started off with, wow, we're in for a treat, and you're in the media, and you instantly tell us it's not just about camera presence, it's about humanizing.
Yeah.
And then you bring us back to at the end of today about humanizing again. So this may be an easy question for you then, is what is the legacy that you want to create as you are going about continuing on this journey of helping people?
Yeah. Well, like I say, that's part of what I want to do in the business space, what I've just said, and be part of that change. But it gets back to the whole brat concept, honestly, because my ultimate legacy is to help young girls.
Okay.
Right now, there's so many of us as women who didn't have maybe the benefit of some of this kind of training, this kind of help, to think of ourselves the way I've talked about a brat being.
Hmm.
But I ultimately have plans for a legacy, a foundation to help young girls at that age where we're still kind of really out there in our own, chart our own
Yeah.
destiny, at like 7 or 8 or 9 or 10. And then we kind of get stuff beaten out of us, right? As we get into the next few years. So ultimately, it's about inspiring and literally helping with concrete things that I have plans for to help women and girls to be bold, relevant, addictive, and transformative. Because it's such a ripple effect, right? Women executives, I have a lot of plans for that. So
cool.
That just is.
Were you pounding on the table?
What's that?
Were you pounding on the table?
Right beside my mic. Never do that.
Well, I think you're right.
Yes.
We're trying to nurture ourselves now as women who are grown, but are part of a generation or generations that were not nurturing us from the beginning. But it does. It starts with that 7 or 8-year-old. And if we can foster that confidence in them, they will go through life a lot confident sooner and for longer than those of us who've learned over time to overcome it, to be a brat, to learn how to be a brat.
Yeah. And to understand that is the most positive thing you can say about somebody.
Yes.
Obviously, I'm also here to change the negative connotation of the brat being that little kid that got sent to the corner because they misbehaved.
We're going to make brat a really charged up word.
In the best sense.
It's been wonderful talking to you, Kathy. How do people get a hold of you?
Well, the best way in terms of corporate, if people are looking for corporate training on camera, and, I do scripting, we didn't get into it. There's so many different aspects to video. So if they want to reach me in terms of that, or just to talk more about this, one of the best ways is on LinkedIn, just to send me a note and connect on LinkedIn. I can give you these links, or I might have, I don't know. They can book a 15-minute call with me on my Calendly link,
okay,
which I can give you. They can go to takeontheworld.ca, which is constantly being updated. There's a page there for the B.R.A.T show that gives you some episodes and some ideas of what that's about. I also, of course, am on YouTube, so they can just look up Kathy Barthel on YouTube, or Kathy Barthel, the B.R.A.T show on YouTube, and you'll find me. Yeah.
Thank you so much. You've been a wealth of knowledge, and it's been enjoyable having this chat with you in so many ways. So thank you very much, Kathy.
Thank you so much, Hilda.
Thank you to my listeners and my viewers as well. If you loved this episode, give it a big thumbs up, And if you want to subscribe, do so. Like us, subscribe, and learn more about how to rev up your potential. Thank you again, Kathy. Thank you, listeners.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Rev Up Your Potential with Hilda Gann. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our podcast on YouTube and Spotify to stay up to date on our latest episodes. For HR tips, news, and strategies, or if you're interested in being a guest on our podcast, visit our website at peoplebrightconsulting.com.